emergency broadcast. This is the Survivor's Hour. For those of you listening right now, you know the world has changed. Forever. The invasion began days ago, but it feels like years, doesn't it? The days blur together, one after another. Time feels distorted now, like we're all caught in some surreal, endless moment. If you're hearing this, you're still here. You've made it this far. And I want you to know, right now, as you're listening to this voice, you're not alone. Not in this. Not ever. Out there, the world has been torn apart. Cities swallowed whole by the unearthly machines, skies darkened by their colossal ships, the air thick with the fear of the unknown. They arrived without warning, without mercy. And yet, through the smoke and devastation, humanity has begun to stand tall again, in whatever way it can. I know you're tired. I know you're scared. But I also know something else. Something that we can't afford to forget. We are survivors. We have been tested by the unimaginable, and yet here we are. Holding on, fighting back. Over the next hour, I'll share with you some stories. Stories from survivors just like you. From those who have found ways to fight back, to adapt, to survive. We'll also talk about what's coming next. New threats, new dangers, but there's hope too, my friends. Yes, there is hope. This is more than just a broadcast. This is your lifeline. Your connection to the rest of us, to the world that still fights. And in this hour, we'll talk about how to live, how to survive, how to hold on when it feels like everything is falling apart. I know some of you are huddled in shelters, listening through cracked devices, trying to preserve your dwindling resources. Others might be on the move, running, hiding, praying for the next safe place, the next break in the storm. And I want you to hear me clearly right now. You are not forgotten. As we stand at the edge of this new world, this alien world, we must remember our strength. We must remember that we still have the will to go on. And maybe, just maybe, we still have the chance to win. But survival isn't just about staying alive, is it? It's about living, about finding the courage to keep moving, to keep fighting, to keep hoping. And I'll be right here with you every step of the way. So, what can you expect over the next hour? First, we'll hear some of the voices of the survivors, the ones who have faced these horrors and lived to tell the tale. I've gathered stories of resilience, courage, and pure human ingenuity. These are the stories you need to hear, because they're the stories that remind us what we're fighting for. Then we'll take a look at the latest updates from the front lines, what's happening out there, where the enemy is hitting hardest, and what's changing with the invasion. You'll need this information to stay safe. Finally, we'll talk survival. I know you're out there, running low on food and water, dealing with the impossible. So, I'll give you some tips, some strategies to help you make it through the next few days, weeks, however long we need to hold out. Together, we'll find a way. But through it all, never forget, this is your moment. This is your time to stand tall. We've been brought to the edge of everything we know, but we are still here, still fighting. So let's begin. Right now, we start by listening. We start by learning from those who have come before us, and by facing the darkness with the courage we've always had inside us. Stay tuned, survivors. It's time to take the next step. And whatever comes, we'll face it together as we stand at the precipice of what's left of our world. It's important to remember that we are not alone in this struggle. All across the globe, survivors are fighting, clinging to whatever fragments of normalcy they can. They are our brothers, our sisters, our neighbors, and sometimes our strangers. Each of their stories is a testament to human resilience. And these stories, your stories, are what will carry us through. Now, let me tell you about a few of those who are still standing, still fighting. These are the voices that might offer you some guidance, some hope, or perhaps just a reminder that we are all in this together. Let me start with the story of a group of survivors who have become something of a beacon for others in these dark times. They call themselves the Winter Haven Refugees. It started in the heart of what used to be the Midwest, a small town, Winter Haven, now reduced to rubble after the first wave of the invasion. But it wasn't the initial attack that defined their survival. No, it was what came after. The town was surrounded by military barricades. The government had abandoned it days ago, its forces decimated. What remained was a tight-knit group of civilians, farmers, doctors, teachers, engineers, all huddled together in the cold remnants of their town, trying to rebuild not just their homes, but a semblance of hope. Among them was a woman named Lydia. She was a former teacher, a quiet soul who had never imagined herself in such a position. But now, Lydia was leading the charge in keeping her community alive. She had organized shifts for scavenging, ensured that everyone had a role to play, and, most importantly, kept hope alive in their hearts. One particularly harrowing night, the Winter Haven refugees were running low on food, with little more than stale bread and water rations. The wind cut through the town like a blade, and fear began to seep into their bones. That's when Lydia made the call. It was a risk, one that could cost them everything, but they had no choice. She sent a small group, including herself, to make the dangerous trek to a nearby military supply depot. It was only 5 miles away, but that distance had become a death sentence since the arrival of the alien ships. For hours, they crept through the wreckage of nearby towns, evading patrols of alien drones that hovered above, scanning for any signs of movement. Lydia and her team worked in silence, using the remains of the wrecked vehicles as cover. They kept their breath shallow, their hearts pounding in their chests. And then, they found it. There, in the heart of what used to be an army base, was a cache of food, medical supplies, and even a few working radios. It was a miracle, a ray of light in the most hopeless of nights. Lydia and her team brought it all back, not just to feed the people of Winter Haven, but to give them something more. It was proof that they could still win, that even in a world where the skies were filled with alien ships and the earth trembled beneath their feet, there were still moments of victory. Lydia's story reminds us that even in the darkest of times, there is power in persistence, in unity, and in the belief that we can still make a difference. In her heart, she knew something the rest of us need to remember. Even when everything seems lost, there is always something worth fighting for. Next, I want to share with you the story of the lost children of Delta One. This group wasn't a community of adults, but something far more fragile. A group of children, orphaned in the aftermath of the invasion. Their story begins on the West Coast, in a city that was once bustling with life, but like so many others, it was reduced to rubble when the invaders landed. The adults, the parents, were lost in the initial strike, but not the children. They had to learn quickly how to survive. The leader of this ragtag group of orphans was a boy named Ezra, just 12 years old, though his eyes had seen more than anyone should ever have to witness. Ezra knew he had to keep them safe, so he led his little group of survivors to an abandoned underground facility, once a government research lab, where they could hide from the alien patrols. The entrance was hidden beneath the ruins of a collapsed building, and it was there that the children found shelter from the storm. But survival wasn't easy. The air was thick with the smell of dust and decay. The walls damp and covered in mold. They lived on scraps they found from the ruins above. But there was no safety from the world beyond. One day, as Ezra was out scavenging, he came across something horrifying. A group of alien drones had picked up their scent. They had been discovered. Ezra's heart raced. His instincts kicked in, and he sprinted back to the shelter, hoping to reach the others before it was too late. When he arrived, he found the children already barricading the door with whatever they could find. But they were scared, so scared. And Ezra was scared too. But he didn't stop. He quickly organized the children, placing them in hidden corners of the shelter, and instructed them on how to stay quiet. For hours they sat in the dark, listening to the low hum of the drones as they scanned the area. The air was thick with tension, but Ezra held his ground. He knew that if they moved too quickly, the drones would hear them. So they waited. It felt like days, but finally, the drones gave up and moved on. And just like that, Ezra had saved them all. The courage of a child, under the most unimaginable circumstances, had kept his group alive. What Ezra taught us is this: courage isn't always about being fearless. It's about knowing the stakes and standing firm, even when the world is breaking down around you. The lost children of Delta One are still out there, surviving. And they are a reminder that sometimes the strength we need to survive doesn't come from age, size, or experience. It comes from within. There's a place far off in the distance where the light still shines. It's a small island untouched by the chaos of the mainland, a sanctuary amidst the disaster. They call themselves the Light Keepers, and their story begins on a quiet coast. Once a simple fishing village, now one of the last remaining havens for those escaping the alien onslaught. The Lightkeepers are a diverse group composed of survivors from all walks of life. The island is their refuge, but it is far from perfect. It's difficult to sustain life on such an isolated patch of earth, and resources are limited. Still, the people of this island have found a way to survive by learning from the past and embracing their dependence on one another. At the heart of this group is an elderly woman named Alara. She's been the island's spiritual guide, and in these dark times, her wisdom has been a beacon for many. Alara remembers the world before the invasion. She remembers the warmth of the sun and the laughter of children. But now, her role is different. She's a caretaker, a mentor, and above all, she is the light that guides the others when all seems lost. The Lightkeepers have built a small community, one that thrives on cooperation. They grow what they can on the island, trade with passing ships, and make do with the sparse resources they have. But what truly sets them apart is their unwavering belief in each other. One day, the island was struck by an unexpected storm, a violent tempest that threatened to wash away everything they had worked for. As the waves crashed against the shore, Alara stood on the cliffs overlooking the chaos, her heart heavy with grief. But then something remarkable happened. One by one, the members of the community came together. They fortified their shelters, rescued those trapped by the tide, and formed a human chain to pull others from the water. Alara's belief in their collective strength never wavered. In the end, the storm passed, and when it did, the Lightkeepers stood together, stronger than ever. The Lightkeepers have shown us something important. We are stronger together than we are apart, even when nature itself seems to be against us. Even when the storm feels insurmountable, we can weather it if we stand side by side. And sometimes the light we need most isn't out there in the world. It's within the people we trust and in the community we build. As these stories show us, survival is not just about the will to live. It's about the courage to keep fighting, the strength to support those around us, and the hope that despite everything, there's still something worth saving. And now, I ask you, survivors, what will your story be? Survivors, if you're just tuning in, I need you to listen closely. The situation is rapidly changing, and it's imperative that we stay informed. The invasion has taken many forms, some we expected, some we could never have prepared for. It's crucial now, more than ever, that we adapt and respond quickly. What I'm about to share with you is not just news, it's a lifeline. This information could mean the difference between survival and something worse. The hum of distant machinery drones for a moment, before the static clears into a clearer broadcast. The enemy's movements are unpredictable, but there are patterns emerging. We've seen shifts in tactics, and new threats have begun to surface that even the most seasoned survivors are struggling to prepare for. There are areas where the situation is deteriorating faster than expected, and others where just when we thought all was lost, there are glimmers of hope. Let's break down what we know, survivor by survivor. We've seen governments collapse in the wake of the initial wave as alien forces wreaked havoc on communication, infrastructure. Entire militaries have been decimated in the first days of the invasion, and what remains has been struggling to coordinate a unified front. In many places, local authorities have taken control, and even in the midst of chaos, we are seeing civilians band together, creating new forms of leadership and self-governance. In the United States, for instance, what was once the capital, Washington, D.C., has now been declared a total loss zone. The aliens seem to have an almost uncanny ability to target key locations, military installations, communication hubs, and major urban centers. Those who managed to escape Washington have retreated into the Appalachian Mountains, where isolated militias are now mounting a fragile defense. Their tactics are less organized than before, but they are growing in number. On the Pacific coast, survivors have begun to form coastal alliances, as certain island communities, like the Lightkeepers we mentioned earlier, are emerging as central points for trade and communication. These small, tight-knit groups are beginning to form trade routes and alliances, despite the ongoing threat from alien drone patrols. The air is thick with uncertainty, but there's a flicker of possibility in these coastal regions. However, the true story is what's happening in Europe and Asia, where the situation has taken an even darker turn. Reports indicate that in certain regions of Europe, alien ground forces have begun to deploy bioorganic machines that are able to terraform large sections of land. These creatures, if you can call them that, seem capable of adapting the environment to suit the invaders' needs, making it nearly impossible for survivors to reclaim certain areas. And yet, even in the midst of this devastation, we are seeing survivors adapt. Areas that were once considered completely lost are slowly beginning to show signs of life again, but the global response remains fractured. Some factions are banding together in secret to create a global resistance, while others, like the European Union, are entirely cut off with little to no communication from the outside world. The world is changing, and the question now is, what will rise from the ashes of the old world? We've learned a great deal about the enemy's capabilities in the last few weeks, but we're still only scratching the surface. The first wave of invaders, those terrifying mechanical ships that blotted out the sky, were only the beginning. The real threat comes from the alien ground forces that have begun to appear in increasing numbers. These creatures, these things, are unlike anything we've encountered. Let me start with the most pressing development. We've received reports from survivors in the Pacific Northwest who've witnessed something new. The alien ground forces have begun deploying biomechanical units designed to hunt and destroy survivors. These units are unlike the mechanical drones we've seen before. They're more organic, more cunning. They can move through the underbrush, blending into the environment, making them nearly impossible to detect until it's too late. The most dangerous of these units are known as the Harbingers, tall, hulking creatures that stand nearly 12 feet tall, with elongated limbs and a terrifyingly fast, predatory gait. They move in packs, and their hunting method is efficient. They stalk survivors for days, tracking them through the dense forest before attacking with brutal precision. Survivors have reported that they communicate in clicks and low guttural sounds, much like a predator sizing up its prey. But the Harbingers are not the only threat. In urban areas, something far more insidious has emerged: the Scourges. These are small, insect-like creatures that seem to swarm in vast, nearly uncountable numbers. They crawl through the wreckage of cities, feeding on the remains of buildings and, yes, human bodies. They are attracted to heat sources, making nighttime survival particularly treacherous. Survivors who've been forced to stay in abandoned buildings for too long report hearing the sound of thousands of tiny feet scraping against the walls, a constant reminder that the scourges are never far behind. We also have reports from the southern hemisphere where strange storms have been occurring with increasing regularity. These storms are not just weather patterns, they are alien in nature, caused by the disruption of the Earth's atmosphere by the alien fleet. The storms themselves have a strange energy signature, and reports suggest that they are able to disrupt both electronic devices and human biology. People exposed to the storms for extended periods of time report dizziness, confusion, and severe headaches. Some survivors believe that these storms are deliberately engineered to weaken us before the next major assault. These new threats are making survival harder than ever before. But the danger isn't just from the aliens, it's also from what's happening to the environment. We're seeing accelerated climate shifts in certain regions, a direct result of the alien forces manipulating the atmosphere. Wildfires are raging across the West Coast, hurricanes batter the southeastern shores, and places that were once temperate are now experiencing unseasonal cold fronts and blizzards. The land itself is changing, becoming hostile, alien, and we, as survivors, must adapt to this new world. Some regions have become so inhospitable that entire populations have been forced to relocate with nowhere to go but further into the wilderness or into the underground bunkers that are quickly becoming overcrowded. The environmental changes are one of the greatest threats to our continued survival. We must think beyond the immediate battle and start preparing for long-term survival strategies. Shelter, water, food, these are the new currencies in this fight, and finding safe places to settle is becoming increasingly difficult. We've all felt the social fabric of our world tear apart in the wake of the invasion. But what's happening now is something we never could have predicted. Factions are forming, not just around ideology or location, but around necessity. Communities are being divided between those who wish to resist the invaders and those who, out of fear or desperation, are beginning to collaborate with them. It's a delicate line, survivors, and the closer you get to certain military zones or heavily occupied cities, the more blurred that line becomes. There's a group in the southern United States that has made a pact with the invaders, trading information for protection. They call themselves the collaborationists. At first, they were seen as traitors, but some argue they are simply doing what they can to survive in a world where survival has become the most important commodity. They claim the alien forces will allow them to rebuild, to thrive in a new world order. But this is dangerous. We have to be careful who we trust now. The enemy has the power to manipulate, to divide, and if we aren't careful, we may find ourselves facing more than just alien forces, but factions of our own kind. The breakdown of old alliances is just the beginning. Trust is becoming a rare currency, and you, survivor, must ask yourself, who can you truly rely on? The road ahead is uncertain. The threats are evolving, and our world is changing in ways we never could have imagined, but we have something the invaders will never understand. The will to survive, the ingenuity to adapt, and the heart to fight for what remains of humanity. The invasion is not over, but we are still here. And as long as we breathe, as long as we fight, there is hope. Keep your eyes open, stay alert, and most importantly, stay united. We face a new world, one filled with dangers both seen and unseen, but we are not alone. And together, we can rebuild. Survival, tips and guidance, navigating the new world survivors. I know it's been a long road. The skies have darkened, and the world you once knew has changed beyond recognition. But here we are, together. And no matter how overwhelming the days ahead may seem, remember this. You have the strength to survive. You've made it this far, and that means something. Now, more than ever, it's important to remember that survival is not just about instinct. It's about preparation. We may not have the luxury of safety nets or time on our side anymore, but we do have knowledge, and knowledge can be a weapon just as sharp as any blade. So let's take a moment to review some critical survival tips. These are practical steps that could very well mean the difference between life and death in this unpredictable, alien-infested world. Finding shelter, creating your safe haven. Shelter, it's the first priority always. You need to keep your body safe, warm, and protected from the elements, and now, from the threats lurking outside. Finding or creating shelter isn't just about comfort, it's about survival. If you haven't already found a safe place, here's what you need to keep in mind. Location is key. Find shelter in areas that offer both concealment and protection. Avoid open fields or large exposed spaces where you're vulnerable to alien drones or patrols. Urban areas are especially risky right now, with alien ground forces actively scouring them. However, dense forests, underground bunkers, or abandoned buildings may offer safer options. If you're in the wilderness, look for natural formations that can offer cover. Cliffs, caves, even thick clusters of trees. However, remember, any natural shelter can have its risks. Cave systems may be home to unknown creatures or alien scouting parties, so always proceed cautiously. If you're taking refuge in abandoned buildings, prioritize safety. Look for strong, secure structures that are least likely to collapse or attract attention. Basements or underground areas can offer the best protection from aerial threats per team, but they're also vulnerable to flooding or structural failure. So assess the area for stability before settling in. Once you've identified your shelter, secure it immediately. Block off windows or any openings that could serve as entry points for unwanted visitors, human or alien. If you have access to materials like wood, metal, or even large furniture, use them to barricade doors and windows. And don't forget to camouflage. Use nearby foliage or debris to cover your shelter's entrances. Remember, when you're inside, stay low and quiet. Alien patrols can detect movement, and the sound of a scuffle could be your last. If you must leave your shelter, always do so with extreme caution, preferably at night or during hours of low activity. Move silently. Finding food and water. Managing limited resources. Food and water. You know as well as I do that these are your lifelines. But they're also the most scarce resources now. If you're in an area with a known supply chain breakdown, you'll need to get creative. The key to surviving with limited resources is resourcefulness and planning. Water, your first priority. Water is the most important resource you'll need to secure. Without it, nothing else matters. Your first task, find a clean water source. If you're in an urban area, try to locate water mains or rivers that may still be flowing. But be careful, water systems may be tainted, contaminated by the aftermath of destruction or alien influence. Always purify water before drinking. If you can't find a filter, try boiling it for at least 5 minutes. If you don't have a fire, look for solar stills, a simple way to distill water using the sun's heat. Alternatively, rainwater collection can be incredibly effective. Set up containers to catch rain and store it for future use. Food, hunting, foraging, and rationing. When it comes to food, you have 3 options: hunting, foraging, and scavenging. Your environment will largely dictate your best course of action. If you're in an urban setting, the first instinct may be to head to a nearby grocery store, but be prepared for the chaos that might await you. Looters, alien patrols, and other survivors who may see you as competition for resources. Instead, focus on small, manageable targets. If you're in the wilderness, hunt small game like rabbits, squirrels, or birds. In urban areas, look for small livestock like chickens or stray animals that can serve as a source of protein. Foraging is another key survival tactic. Many plants are still edible, and knowing what to look for could save your life. Dandelion greens, acorns, and wild garlic can be useful. But be careful. Never eat anything unless you are absolutely sure it's safe. There are poisonous plants out there that can kill you in a matter of hours. Lastly, rationing. Once you have food, you need to make it last. Break your meals into small portions and eat sparingly. It's better to eat small amounts more frequently than to gorge yourself and risk running out too soon. Safety protocols, dealing with alien threats. Now let's talk about the new threats. The ones that you can't see until it's too late. Alien drones, ground forces, and the unknown creatures they've unleashed on the world. Your survival depends on quick thinking and careful observation. You may not be able to defeat these creatures head on, but you can outsmart them. Alien drones and surveillance. The most persistent threat, especially in urban areas, are the alien drones that patrol the skies. These machines are nearly impossible to avoid, but you can make yourself less visible to them. Avoid open spaces. Drones are designed to patrol and scan large open areas. They'll have difficulty picking up on movement in dense, cluttered environments. Stay low. The more you can stay below their line of sight, the better. Moving beneath the cover of buildings, trees, or any solid object will decrease your chances of being detected. Use noise. Drones rely heavily on sound detection. If you need to move quickly, use loud noises, rubble falling, machinery running, to mask your movements. It's risky. But in certain situations, it could buy you valuable time. Facing alien ground forces. If you encounter ground forces, especially harbingers or scourges, the best option is evacuation. Get out of there. These creatures are faster, stronger, and far more deadly than anything human. The last thing you want is to engage them in combat. Hide. If you can't run, hide. Find any form of cover that provides concealment. The less visible you are, the less likely the aliens will spot you. Distraction tactics. If you have to, set up a diversion. Throw rocks, knock over debris, or set off a trap. The goal is to draw their attention away from you. Stay quiet. Above all, make no noise. Even the smallest sound could alert them to your position. Stay as still and as silent as possible. Mental and emotional survival. Staying strong inside survivors. We cannot ignore the toll this crisis has taken on us mentally and emotionally. In this world of constant threats and uncertainty, it's easy to feel like giving up, but you can't afford to let despair take hold. Emotional survival is just as critical as physical survival. Staying connected, find ways to connect with others, even if it's only for brief moments. A single word of encouragement, a shared meal, or even the sound of someone's voice can make all the difference. Don't isolate yourself for too long. It's easy to lose hope when you're alone. Keeping a routine. When everything else feels chaotic, establish a daily routine. Even simple things, waking up at the same time, scavenging at set hours, keeping busy with small tasks, can help anchor you and give you a sense of normalcy. Mindfulness and focus. Finally, don't let your mind wander into the abyss. Focus on what you can control and take things one step at a time. Break down your survival plan into manageable goals and celebrate each small victory, whether that's finding food or simply getting through another day. Survivors, it's hard, isn't it? This world isn't the one you knew. It's something new, something darker. But as long as you keep moving, keep adapting, and keep trusting in your own strength, there's always hope. You are capable of far more than you realize, and no matter how many times the world falls around you, you will stand up. Together, we will stand up. Stay vigilant, stay strong, and remember, this is your story. Write it however you choose. Survivors, this is the moment we've all been dreading. You knew it was coming. The uneasy quiet, the kind of silence that feels like the world holding its breath, waiting, watching. But now it's finally here. Something is shifting. If you're listening to me right now, you've survived the storm. You've made it through the chaos, the uncertainty, the days when hope seemed like a distant memory. But now the true test begins. You've made it this far, but the question remains. Can you make it through what's coming next? The air feels thicker tonight, heavier. You can sense it, can't you? Something is different in the atmosphere. A change. as though the earth itself is warning you, urging you to move. But you have no choice but to stay put. This is it. Listen, there's no easy way to say this. We've been hearing reports for hours now. Strange patterns in the drone patrols. They're circling closer. 12 sightings in your area, maybe more. You've always known that they were capable of finding us. But tonight is different. The drones are scanning the ground closer than ever before. They're sweeping the area. They're looking for you. If you're inside, do not move. The slightest sound could betray your position. But don't think you're safe just because you're hidden. They've learned, survivor. They're not just looking for us anymore. They're hunting. They've become smarter. You know what they can do. The cold, ruthless efficiency of those alien eyes. Watching. Always watching. But tonight, it's worse. Reports from a survivor group in the ruins of the old city say that the drones aren't alone anymore. The Harbingers, those monstrous, towering creatures, have joined the search. They move through the dark like shadows, their limbs stretched out long and unnatural. They've been adapting, just like the drones. They've learned. I can feel it too. The unease crawling along your spine. The walls are closing in, and the longer you stay in one place, the more vulnerable you become. I know you've been waiting for the right moment to move, for the opportunity to escape, to find a safer place. But what if tonight is the night? What if you have no choice but to make a decision, a choice that could cost you everything? But let me slow down. Let me guide you through this. If you're listening to my voice, you still have a chance. It's not too late. There are ways out, ways to survive this. But you must act fast. I'm about to tell you what needs to be done, and you must listen because there may not be time to repeat myself. First, check your surroundings. Silence is your greatest weapon right now. If you haven't already, cover up any sources of light. That fire, your flashlight, your heat signature. The drones have infrared sensors, and those light sources, they will lead them straight to you. The last thing you want is to be visible when they're sweeping through the area. Next, listen carefully to what I'm about to say. You may need to leave. I know how hard it is to leave behind what little you have left. The shelter, the food, the warmth, it all feels like your lifeline. But there is one truth you can't ignore. Nothing matters more than staying undetected. The longer you stay in one place, the greater the risk. And when those drones close in, if they're circling overhead, you'll be trapped. But how do you move without being seen? It's simple. Use the cover of darkness. Wait until the drones pass. Watch for their patrol patterns. Time it. Move only when the area is clear, but move with purpose. Stay low. The more you make yourself a target, the more likely you are to be caught. If you're moving through urban areas, always check your environment first. Look for small, hidden spaces, alleyways, underground tunnels, anything that will provide temporary cover. Don't expose yourself. The moment you do, the drones will have you in their sights. They've found something. They've spotted a movement, a scent, a sound. They're getting closer, much closer. Now you have two choices. You can hide and hope they don't find you, or you can run. The drones won't stop until they have you, but if you're swift, if you're quiet, you might just slip away. But the Harbingers, they're not going to give up easily. You can't outrun them in a sprint, not without a plan. If you're faced with one of those creatures, you need to use your environment to your advantage. Lead it into a trap, into a space where it can't move. Slow it down. Do whatever it takes. Your life depends on it. It's time. Survivors, you can hear them now. The drones, the Harbingers, the decision is in your hands. Will you run? Will you fight? Or will you hide? Pray and hope that this night, this moment, passes you by. You don't have the luxury of waiting anymore. The moment has come. Survivors, I know how hard it's been. The days have blurred into nights, and each one feels like an endless struggle. But as we come to the close of this broadcast, I want to remind you of something you might have forgotten in the midst of all the chaos, all the fear. we're still here. When the invasion first began, the world felt like it was breaking apart, literally and figuratively. Every corner of our lives was upended by the alien forces that descended from the sky. And yet you are still here. You've survived longer than so many others. And that resilience, that fire inside you, that is the spark of hope in this dark world. It's easy to get lost in the shadows. It's easy to forget that the things we once took for granted, community, love, the bonds that connect us as humans, still matter. They are the lifeblood of what we're fighting for. They are the very thing the invaders never understood, that no matter how much they try to break us, they can never truly take away our humanity. Hope doesn't come from what we've lost. It comes from what we've refused to lose. It comes from the way we've picked ourselves up day after day to face whatever new horrors the universe throws our way. It comes from the way we've fought to protect each other, even when the odds seemed impossible. And that, survivors, is what will carry us forward. It's that light in the darkness. It's the knowledge that as long as we have each other, we can endure. We will adapt. We will rebuild. I know it feels like the world is falling apart around you. I know the fear of the unknown grips your heart when you hear the drones above or see the shadows move in the dark. But you're not alone. You never have been. In every corner of this shattered world, there are others like you. Survivors, fighters, dreamers. And together, we will find a way. It won't be easy. It will take everything you have and more. But I want you to remember one thing. The darkness cannot last forever. Even now, as we sit in the quiet aftermath of a terrifying event, the earth is still turning, the sun still rises, and so long as we hold on, there is always the promise of a new day. If you're listening to this, you have the power to decide what happens next. The next chapter of this story is still being written, and though the path ahead may be uncertain, know that every step you take, no matter how small, moves us forward. I want you to take a breath with me. Just for a moment, close your eyes and think about what you're fighting for. Think about the people you've lost and the ones you still have by your side. Hold on to those thoughts because they are the foundation of your survival. When everything else falls away, those memories, those connections will remain. And now I ask you to do one thing. Keep fighting. For yourself. For those you love. For the future we are all working toward. You are stronger than you know. And though the road ahead is dark, there is light waiting on the other side. In the next broadcast, we'll dive deeper into what's coming. What the next phase of this invasion means for us all. How we can turn the tide in our favor. And perhaps most importantly, we'll talk about the hope we're clinging to as we fight for the future of this world. So don't give up. Stay tuned. Stay with us. Survivors, this is not the end. It's only the beginning. We're in this together, always. Stay vigilant. Stay strong. And most of all, stay hopeful. If you've made it this far and listened to this radio broadcast, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. We've discussed some deep topics, faced challenges together, and hopefully touched moments of hope along the way. If you like the content, please subscribe to our channel so we can continue creating more broadcasts like this for you. And don't forget to like and share the video. Your support means the world to us. Without it, we wouldn't have the motivation to keep creating the kind of content that you enjoy. Every like, share, and comment gives us the strength to keep pushing forward and improve our broadcasts. So remember today and make sure to join us for the next episode. Stay with us because this journey is far from over. Thank you, survivors. Your support is our true strength.